Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. Iran now faces a very clear choice with only two paths before them: complete global isolation or a path back to normalcy. That was U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent as Washington launched what it calls an unprecedented economic offensive against Tehran, even as Iran maintains pressure around the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced Syria's removal from the U.S. state sponsors of terrorism list, as Washington also mediates security talks between Syria and Israel. And joining us now is Julia Sochacka, Middle East analyst at the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Good to have you back with us.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
So a lot of stuff going on right now. Let's start with this new announcement by the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So Syria is removed from this terrorism list. So how consequential is that? What does that allow for Syria to do? What's going to happen next with that?
So it is a very beneficial development for Syria, for the new Ahmed al-Shara government, because apart from another exemplification of reintegrating Syria into the global platform, it also opens way for investment and resuming economic exchange between Syria and, well, generally the rest of the world, right? Because despite the fact that the sanction list was imposed by the US, it obviously projected onto the whole Western hemisphere and all the US allies. So what we should see right now is a spike in investment, which will be very profitable on one hand, considering the vast areas that investment can be executed in, but also it is very necessary for Syria to rebuild, because being torn for over 15 years by the civil war, there is a huge amount of damage, and there are a lot of sectors that have been so far underinvested and that need further development. So I would definitely expect some good developments on the economic side. And on the more political side, it definitely is another token of trust from the Trump administration to the Shara government.
Yeah, and we've seen also over the last few months, right, foreign leaders connecting with Syria, visiting Syria as well in Damascus. Let's stay that on a moment there as well. Let's look at these arbitration talks with the United States, also again mediating now between Israel and Syria. So, I mean, also significance of that, do you sense any breakthrough there? Will we have some kind of agreement? If we had, I think, something similar to 1974, I mean, this is still a precarious relationship between Israel and Syria. Will this now change?
Well, the relationship is very fragile because Syria is a point of interest for Israel for multiple reasons. Some of them are internal to Israel, especially considering the upcoming election. Some of them are endemic to Syria and its geographic location, and also past conflicts that broke out between the two. And apart from that, we also have a very specific type of ethnic group that lives near the border, which is the Druze, which also live on the other side of the Golan Heights, and Israel tries to portray themselves as someone who will protect the Druze from the new government. And apart from that, also we have the international dimension, which is that Syria is now closely aligned with Turkey. And Turkey was one of the architects of how the new Syria, post-Assad Syria, looks like. And Turkey is a quite natural adversary of Israel, and that rivalry has been growing in the recent years especially. So that spike in conflict that we've seen for the few days, few weeks, it is also partially motivated by, on one hand, growing presence of Turkey in Syria, also military. On the other hand, also the increase in Turkey's position in the region, especially the Mecca Pact.
Yeah, and interesting you mentioned Turkey. That was going to be my next question as well. I mean, I think it was on August 18th, there was an airstrike in northwestern Syria. Now, apparently there were no casualties, but apparently Israel is claiming that the Turks were going to be sending and stationing troops there, maybe some kind of air personnel. There's apparently a radar system that was apparently on its way. So again, you're saying like this is also a signal potentially here. And what does that mean? Because we have two very close U.S. allies, right, with the Turks and also the Israelis. So which one is going to, let's say, receive favor, if at all, by the United States. How does the United States arbitrate here between these two?
So it is true that both of them are closely allied with the U.S. However, Israel has traditionally been the main partner in the Middle East. Although Turkey is important, it's right now growing, especially considering their industrial defense base, which is also important for the U.S., for Europe, for NATO as a whole. So I guess that's the first thing that pushed the U.S. to mediate between the two, because also what is important right now in a broader region is that Syria is stable, and Syria cannot be stable if Israel continues its destabilizing actions in the south, but also, as we can see, that can be expanded beyond only the proximity of Golan Heights. So for now, my assessment is, my reading is that the U.S. will try to keep the conflict at very low intensity with as little as possible effect on the general stability of Damascus. However, if things escalate, then probably they will have to either pick a side or try to mediate further. However, Turkey right now is working very hard to create regional architecture of defense that does not definitely include Israel, and that would counter potential American influence there. But also what we can see from yet another point of view is that the Americans seemingly losing interest in protruded presence in the broader region.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask, because I mean we've also had that pact, this defense pact, right? Not that long ago, in Mecca, signed with Turkey involved, with Pakistan, with Saudi Arabia. But we'll have to get to another point. I wanted to kind of scale out because that's connected to Iran in many ways. Let's talk about also what the U.S. Secretary has said, Mr. Best, and Treasury Secretary, about this Iran facing a clear choice, very threatening words. It's economic D-Day. We've heard tough rhetoric like that from the United States before. But very much, if we look at this warning, I mean, isn't it really centered only on China? I mean, I think it's 90% of the oil that comes through Strait of Hormuz goes to China. So is this threat directed at Beijing? And what's the United States going to do about it? Will it follow through on this threat?
So it is definitely aimed at China and probably all the other trade partners that Iran so far has maintained, which also span mostly across Asia. There is not that many ways that the U.S. can push Iran without affecting anyone else right now, because the scope of sanctions has already been quite vast. So what they can do right now is focus on making sure nothing gets out, for example, through the Strait of Hormuz, but also pushing at the global financial system, right? So the way payments are made, what currency they're made in. However, that, as I believe Scott Bessent said, would significantly impact the whole global financial architecture, so it cannot happen overnight. And I think that's the message that is being sent out, especially to China, which is that there is growing pressure on Iran to reopen the diplomatic channels. And today morning, I think we've already seen that Pakistan is trying to hint at the renewed negotiations of the memorandum of understanding. So it is more a hint, more a push for all the allies that Iran has left to make it come back to the negotiating table. Because what we need to remember about all the tactics that America has been using for the past few weeks or even maybe months is that they are not necessarily aimed at incurring more and more losses, either military ones or economic ones, but more at trying to make out a lasting peace agreement. That will be obviously more beneficial to the U.S. than it is to Iran. However, that's still a secondary aim.
Yeah, and I think once we talk about this entire global system, I mean, the U.S. has been, and Donald Trump, the president, has been not shy of saying that the allies, the European allies, should have been involved with him, should have helped him in all of this, kind of oscillating between I need you, I don't need you. So in this, like, if we're saying it's pointed at China, obviously Europe will be affected in some way. So what do you think Europe's response is going to be to all this? European allies, how are they going to be involved in this newest threat from the United States?
So I expect a balanced response because apart from being closely connected to the US and definitely in a position of criticism towards Iran, Europe also is still very wary of being involved in a conflict itself. And it may happen because of the expanded either military presence that Europe is keeping outside of its territories, and by financial ties that do not necessarily tie Europe with Iran to a large extent, but they tie Europe to all the neighbors around. And obviously whatever is happening in the Arabian Peninsula is also affecting the European Union, as we've seen with the gas prices. So here I would expect a balanced response and maybe some move around the sanctions, the sanctions packages that we've introduced here. However, it would be very measured.
Yeah, and we've also already heard that the Iranian response is calm. They're saying they're prepared for this. So let's see who blinks first once again. It's going to be more to analyze in the future. Look, thanks so much for coming, Julia Sochacka there from the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks, but do stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.